Behold, the single most destroyed AK parts kit I have ever seen. Normally, when someone says they have a parts kit that is destroyed or in poor condition, usually it's referring to a bad demill job, like whoever in the warehouse that cut these things apart just didn't give a damn, which is pretty common. But in this case, this thing was destroyed before it was destroyed. This thing was worn out and then some before it even became a parts kit. So, first things first, let's start with what even is this thing? So this thing, as you probably saw in the title, is a Polish AKMSL, which is quite the mouthful. But what that means, it is a Polish stamped receiver, AKM and 7.62x39, with a specialized side rail added on. This side rail is made specifically for this absolutely massive NSP-3 night vision optic. This is I believe a Generation 1 night vision optic. These things are not very good, but they are super cool. They were very important to the Soviet satellite countries back in the day. And one of the coolest parts is that if you pop it open in there, it actually has a battery compartment, and you can ghetto rig like a AAA adapter to put in there to run these things. And I've done it, and this one actually does work. It makes the super cool like video game kind of noise. A little different, but still really cool. You do have to be very careful with these things because they are extremely sensitive. They don't have auto gating like modern night vision, which means that if you point it at a bright light, like right now inside with lights on, you will fry the receptors in this thing and brick the thing. So anyways, the other thing that they did other than the side rail to accommodate is it actually has a special underfolding stock. This arm here is jogged outwards and then cut away so that when it's on the gun like that and you go to swing it closed on the gun, it clears that rail. Now you can't fold it with the optic on, but it does allow you to fold it for transport and storage, etc. Because normally you wouldn't be lugging this thing around on the rifle unless you're about to go shoot it. Because these things are, like I said, they're highly prized, very valuable. I guess let's start into, other than obviously the paint being worn, what actually is worn out on this gun and how to gauge it. Okay, so starting on the front sight block here, it might actually just be immediately apparent to the naked eye. Clearly there's something wrong with those threads. So I have a theory as to how this happened, why these are shaped like a pipe thread when they shouldn't be, but I've never seen anything quite like it, so this is just speculation. I did see some transport cases for these things where it's got a spot for the flash hider in the box with the night vision optic, so maybe these were just left overseas. Anyways, if you put a slant brake on this thing, you can push it halfway up the threads before it does anything, and if you start threading it, they're not doing a whole lot. What I suspect was happening with these guns is that they might have been blank firing guns for training. Now, on the AK, what you need, like many rifles, to shoot blanks is a blank firing adapter. So if you just put a blank in the gun with no bullet, you know, it's just powder and flash, it just goes out the muzzle and the gun doesn't cycle. You need to put one of these little guys on there in order to retain enough pressure in the system to run the action and cycle the gun so it actually works. Now, these just thread on like any other muzzle device. You hold your detent and torque it down like that. And why I think this thread problem may have come from a BFA is these do put a significant amount of force forward on the threads, and also the gas is going to build up in a little tiny chamber in here, and it's also going to erode the threads. The gas from burning gunpowder is very hot and it likes to erode steel. So I think this thing just lived with a BFA on it for a really long time, and that contributed to wearing out those threads and stretching it. Now, the other thing going on the muzzle end, we pull this off, is something kind of cool. It's an old Soviet practice, or I guess it's not strictly Soviet, but I see it a lot on Soviet guns. Counterboring. So you can see it's got a big old hole here in the muzzle, and you may not be able to see in the camera, but that goes back to like roughly there, maybe a little higher up. This practice is done on rifles that have been shot so much that the muzzle begins to wear out on the inside of the rifling. It kind of becomes sort of a bell mouth shape, so as the bullet's going out, it may not exit perfectly straight. So what they do is they get rid of the worn area, and your muzzle is actually back there or whatever now, where the rifling is a little stronger, a little less worn out, and that restores some level of accuracy to the gun. So moving back on the rifle to the gas block here, this is what tipped me off initially that this rifle was pretty dang worn out. So I picked it up and I immediately saw, look how thin those webs are on that gas block. That is a lot of flame erosion to get rid of that much material. Now, on the AK, the fitment of the gas piston into the block is absolutely critical for reliability. If the fitment's too loose, you're going to lose gas around the piston, and it's not going to have enough energy to cycle the gun reliably. So we grab the gas piston here. Here is the gas piston attached to the carrier, as normal. It actually looks pretty good. It's a little chewed up, but I have seen much worse, especially from like Yugos, for example. They like to chip the chrome off. This actually looks okay, but if we go ahead and put it inside the gas block, dunk dunk, that is really loose. This should be like a nice sliding kind of fit, you know what I mean? And that is done. Now, to show you exactly how done it is, we can look at the East German Translated Armorer's Manual that gives a spec for how to gauge this. So this is the East German Armorer's Repair Manual, translated by John Baum. You can buy these at a few different places, and I highly recommend getting one if you work on AKs. So I'll just show you this little excerpt here. The gas piston, in short, basically the gap must not be more than 0.2 millimeters. So if you measure that and measure that, the difference can be no more than 0.2 millimeters. I can tell you just from that it's more than 0.2, but we can measure it out just to get a hard number. So 13.9-ish, 13.9, 13.92. Okay. And my bore gauge here, this thing is calibrated, works good. It's old, but it's right on spec. This is in inches, so I'm gonna have to measure it and do some translating if I put it up on screen. 568, spin it a little, almost 570, 571. Oops, went a little too far. Yeah, like 570 at max. Yeah, so that's clapped out. Anyways, moving on. So there's actually nothing wrong with the gas tube. I just thought I would mention that the inside actually looks really good. While this gun was certainly abused thoroughly, it was also pretty well maintained in terms of like rust, because a lot of these guns are shot with corrosive ammunition, and if it's left unclean for a long time, the inside of the gas tube will look like the surface of the moon with pitting and craters everywhere. This one actually looks pretty good. So next up is the bolt carrier. This is overall pretty good. This is a really good example to look at for what wear patterns in a properly built AK should be. Because as this video progresses and you see more of the wear on this gun, it's evident that this thing has shot countless rounds. Whether it be blank fire or live fire, that bolt carrier is coming back at the same speed, more or less. Let's take a look. The carrier tail here at the rear looks very, very good. Carrier tail wear and peening is fairly common on AKs, and it's actually kind of a controversial subject because it's highly dependent on the combination bolt carrier, like bolt carrier hardness, the exact geometry, what hammer you're using, how fast the gun's cycling, like your gassing. It's a combination of basically everything about the gun. So you could grab two different AKs, like if you had this guy and then the next one off the production line with the next serial number, they might wear differently. But this is just to show you, this is what like perfect wear looks like on a carrier tail. It peens very slightly and then it stops. So when you're looking at a worn out cam groove, almost always, sorry, this pencil's really sad. Almost always what gives it away that this gun's had a lot of rounds through it or was poorly built, which I don't think is the case. This little guy right here is going to wear out and peen over. Now this is what we call the flat spot. I'm not sure what the actual name is, but what it does is if you put your bolt in here, put it forward, on an AK, when the bolt carrier group is riding through the receiver, the bolt is actually sitting on that little spot. So if you were to push rearward on the bolt, it does not rotate. I mean, unless you do what I just did and knock it off the flat. It does not want to rotate. Unlike an AR-15 where the bolt is always trying to rotate, the AR-15 gets away with it for a variety of very specific design decisions that made that work, which cannot be done on the AK because the AK bolt carrier group is so loose in the receiver. If this guy was trying to rotate, it would go like that, bite into the rails, and the whole thing locks up. And you'll actually see that on super worn out AKs. They will do exactly that. The bolt carrier will just randomly lock up along the way. So this little flat spot engages with this corner here on the bolt. We'll get to the bolt later, but those two sit on each other. And if the gun is timed improperly, it'll smash over that corner. And it looks like this gun was timed slightly improperly. With the amount of rounds it's had on it, and this is only very slightly worn, it's not too far off. Because if you see AKs that are built very improperly on timing, this can happen in like a couple hundred rounds. So anyways, all of that is to say, the bolt carrier looks pretty good. This is cause for concern. If you were an armorer, this would get replaced with a new one, but I bet this is still functional. There's really nothing wrong with it, so to say. Next up, the bolt. So it's pretty heavily worn on all the contact surfaces. As you probably just saw, the flat spot is peened and rolled over. As I said, this is like not ideal, but it would probably work. Or rather, it will work, if not for other circumstances in this kit. I've seen AKs with wear a good bit worse than that still work. There's not a whole lot going on here in terms of damage. If you look up here, you can see our lug contact where it touches the front trunnion and locks the gun shut. The contact is perfect on both sides. That's about as far as it rotates. And I would hope the contact would be perfect by now with how many rounds it's fired. But that looks good. The next thing to do is to gauge it. So I have a set of Soviet armorer gauges. This guy here is the firing pin protrusion gauge. So it's got a go and a no-go, like most. You set it on a flat surface. You put this guy on the bolt face, and it should touch the go, 1.4. It should not touch the no-go, 1.52. So you probably can't see it, but I'm checking it out. No-go is good, and it touches the go because it rocks around instead of sitting flat on the go. So the firing pin protrusion is good. The next one is the extractor clearance gauge. So this guy is going to slide underneath the extractor and basically give a measurement of how hard that extractor is grabbing onto a live cartridge. So it's got two sides just like the other one. There you go. It's got a slightly thicker side, slightly thinner side. 1.7 is your go, and 1.9 is your no-go. So let's start with the 1.7. Goes in just fine, and the 1.9 also goes in. So that means either the extractor or the bolt is worn out. This no longer passes the extractor gauge. So next up is the front trunnion. This gun's from 1978. It is matching on the bolt and carrier, and I think everything is matching on this, but I'd have to check. First thing you may notice is the PLAW mark there, or AMW, excuse me. To my understanding, this mark means, hello, I am the Polish government. I have gotten rid of this gun. I'm not entirely sure on that, but that's what the forums seem to think. Anyways, if we get in here and look at the wear patterns, the bolt turning guide ramp has a worn spot, but it looks just fine. The right side lug here looks just fine. Just surface wear from the bolt gliding over it a billion times. And the impact surface here on the left side looks just fine, no real peening. This is what you would expect from a properly built surplus AKM. But what tells me this gun has been shot a lot. Go ahead and lock the bolt in the trunnion. There's a good bit of wiggle there. That's not good. So we have headspace gauges to test it. So these are Soviet surplus headspace gauges out of an armorer's kit. We're going to start with the go gauge, which is the tightest gauge, K3. This is the shortest gauge, closest to live ammunition. And if you really if you were building this gun, it would be good to take the extractor out to get like a scientific good measurement of headspace, but this is just like a field test, I guess. The results will show you why I'm not super concerned about it. So if we go ahead and put a go gauge in there, closes all the way, no problem. Shocker. Put a no-go gauge in there, which is K number 4. Yeah, you can't see it. The engravings are very shallow. It's K4. Closes all the way on the no-go. So basically, if you're not familiar, when you are building a gun, you want to set it slightly tight on a go gauge, and that ensures that headspace is as tight as possible, basically meaning that the amount that the cartridge is supported is as much as possible. So as much of the cartridge is in the chamber as can be when the bolt's shut. The no-go gauge, if a gun closes on a no-go, it's basically indicative like, hey, be careful, something is moving, keep an eye on this. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't shoot it. Now, if it's not a life or death situation, I would recommend not shooting it if it closes on a no-go, because you never know. But, you know, if you were an armorer in the field, the enemy's going to attack tomorrow or whatever, it closes on a no-go, who cares? And then the last one is a field gauge. This is basically a gauge that says if the gun closes on this gauge, it is close to exploding, or at the very least it's going to split cases, and the gun is going to go down when you're in a fight. So if it closes on this gauge, it's very bad. And as you can probably guess, it closes on the field. So you can see it doesn't close quite as far as the other cartridges. That lug is not touching all the way. But if you put the bolt carrier on there, it closes all the way on the field. So this gun was shot an absolute ton. Normally with AKMs, so like this rifle, 1mm stamped receiver, they tend to go somewhere between 60,000 to 80,000-ish rounds before the front trunnion cracks and the gun's dead. And they usually don't lose headspace before that. Now that is pretty subjective. Just the combination of what ammo you're running, how hard the bolt is, how hard the trunnion is, how well they were fitted together. It can kind of be all over the place. But places like Battlefield Las Vegas say these guns usually fail at like 80,000. Which is to say, all of that is to say, this gun is probably near the point of death. If it's closing on a field gauge, one of these, either the bolt or the trunnion, is probably going to give up pretty soon. So if you were to rebuild this thing, you know, like toss out this gas block and get a new one, replace the extractor until you find one that gauges right, maybe repair the bolt carrier if needed. If you were to do all that and rebuild this, it's still a sketchy gun. It's probably going to fail relatively soon. That's just life with the surplus gun. This is a super, super rare gun. There's only like roughly 20 to 30 of these things ever imported. And it's had a hard life, and it's done. It's ready to retire. It's ready to settle down. So this is just going to be a quick look with a bore scope down the barrel stubs. That is your gas port there. Nice chunk missing out of the rear, and then the absolutely massive, I don't even know what to call them, like valleys on either side, where the flame cutting and erosion has just formed these channels forward and backwards from the gas port. And here we are at the rear of the chamber. See, the chrome lining's mostly intact in the chamber. And then that's the neck, and that's the throat. And right as we get past the throat, it's back to sewer pipe. Pretty significant erosion everywhere, chrome missing, chunks falling out. This thing is just beyond done. Like I said, that's life of surplus guns. Sometimes you get a gun that's been rode hard and it's just done. Something cool to look at though when we're talking about things like wear patterns is the ejector. Of course, there's a bunch of torch cut slag all around there from being demilled. But if you look close, my camera will let you look close, the ejector really looks pretty good. Not really much peening, basically just surface wear. On US made receivers, these things often are heat treated wrong and you'll see this edge start rolling over within like 5 to 10,000 rounds. So this is doing pretty good. See the absolutely massive groove worn in from the selector. Look at the safety. This is where your safety goes and pivots. It's got like, I can catch it with the pencil. It's got a groove worn in from being manipulated so much. Same with the stock. You can absolutely... That has been folded and unfolded a gazillion times. Of course, same on the other side. Mag catch pretty worn. I don't have enough Polish guns here to give a definitive answer, but I don't think the Polish serialized hammers. So this isn't necessarily the hammer that was in the gun for its entire life, but whatever it is, it's pretty heavily worn. But it's still in pretty good shape. You can see that slight flat spot up here at the top from where it hits the carrier tail. Looks pretty good. I spotted this while I was finishing up. This gas tube lever is a bit loose. It looks like someone tried to fix it by just hammering it. Classic. Well, as much as I hate to say it, there's not much else you can do with this thing other than build it out as a wall hanger. Maybe shoot it once just to see if the gassing is as bad as I think it's going to be. Nonetheless, it's still a very cool gun and a neat piece of Soviet firearms history. So the kit I just showed you belongs to a friend of mine. This one is mine, also an AKMSL. The stock's a little crushed. That's not a big deal. You can straighten them out. Just going over it really quickly, the muzzle threads are also stretched, but not quite as bad. The barrel is also counterbored. The gas block fitment is also FUBAR. And it also closes on a field gauge. So whatever life these two guns lived, it was pretty much the same one. See, the flat spot on the bolt has similar damage, and in the carrier also has similar damage. The carrier tail is very slightly more peened, but still pretty good. And really quickly, this one is my fixed stock AKML. Slightly less of a mouthful. It is a couple years older. The gas block fitment is just about as bad as the other two. Pretty done. The muzzle threads, I pulled the stub off, but the muzzle threads are actually the worst out of the three. New quick change muzzle device, I guess. The flat spot in the bolt carrier looks pretty good. It's very slightly worn. It's better than the others. The carrier tail also looks good. And the flat spot in the bolt is pretty rounded over, so I think maybe the bolt gave up first, so it didn't damage the carrier quite as much. But anyways, before I demilled it, this one closed on a no-go, but did not close on a field. So this one is slightly less worn, but it's still pretty destroyed. Like I said, I don't know what these guns were doing in Polish service, but whatever it was, they were doing it for a very long time. And last but not least, here's the night vision carrying case. Some guy's name on there. This is pretty neat. I already undid the clasp, so I wouldn't have to do it one-handed on camera. That just pulls out. Set that down. This is from the previous owner, Ghetto Rigging AA batteries to run the thing. They worked. It's got some stuff in here. It's got a spare eyepiece. I think there's bulbs in there or batteries or something like that. Some cleaning supplies. But yep, that's it for this video. Just a quick look at some of the most beat up AKs I have ever seen. Thanks for watching.